All right, so I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here for our March 2026 session of Community Health Learning Collective. Can't believe it is already March. March is almost over. That is amazing, but we hope you are having a wonderful spring so far. For those of you who may be new to the group, Community Health Learning Collective, or CHLC, is just a very casual shared learning space. We meet once a month on Zoom, and these meetings are primarily geared towards community health workers, promotoras de salud, community health representatives, or similar job titles. We also welcome allies and supervisors, and really just people who support the work that we do as community health workers. So we're glad you're here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy workday to be here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our session today and introduce our presenter. So we are super thrilled to welcome Jess Rodriguez. They are a certified guide through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy and the founder of Reciprocal Forest Bathing. Jess is also the coalition building manager at Brushwood Center, where they oversee the health, equity, and nature accelerator program. So Jess is dedicated to living through the forest and sharing the love for and of the forest with all. So today's session is integrating nature-based solutions into healthcare systems, and really an exciting, wonderful topic, also a timely one, as like I said, we are in the midst of, at least here in Illinois, the beginning of spring. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jess. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, all. Thank you so much for that introduction, Maureen. Um, I am going to be providing you all with a presentation today that I've created on integrating nature-based solutions into the healthcare system. And we're going to go through, we have an agenda, and a lot of it is about, the practice that I guide and that I lead, a project that I'm working on, as well as how to develop our own personal practice within creating a connection to nature. And so, with that, know that every piece of this presentation is extremely intentional in its ability to weave nature into this presentation and also to provide perhaps ideas or to think creatively about how we can bring nature into all of our spaces. So even as I'm giving the presentation and maybe if I'm talking about, things that I might be working on or doing, also take it as an opportunity, as an example, right? Like we can pull these things apart and put them together in our own ways. So thank you all so much for taking the time to be here today, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I'll share these slides out as well after our um, presentation today. As soon as, there we go. Beautiful. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Yay, thank you. Wonderful. So today's presentation is on integrating nature-based solutions, and we're going to start with a bit of a land acknowledgement. And so if you have brought a nature being with you here today, whether that is a plant or a rock, maybe you have a leaf or some flowers, or even if you're able to sit near a window and to look outside, if you have wood floors, maybe you put your feet on the ground, reminding us all that nature is everywhere. And so find a moment to get a little bit more comfortable in your seat and aware of the nature being that is with you. And I will go ahead and read our land acknowledgement for today. So, the earth, the being that is present in all of us, and the being of which we are all a part of, offers all beings everything that they need for nourishment and growth. The earth offers us fresh air, clean water, food, and healing medicine. The earth expands across space, but also time, having nurtured beings far before us and will continue to nourish beings long after us. The earth offers us each the gift of healing by cultivating presence and reconnecting with the reciprocal relationship that is so deeply intuitive to humans. The relationship with the earth is deeply embodied by Indigenous peoples who have kept this connection alive and brought ongoing and endless awareness to how the health and well being of the earth is also the health and the well being of humans. And therefore, we must acknowledge that this communion has been ripped and taken away from many Indigenous peoples over and over again. And where I am, specifically in Lake County and Cook County, Illinois, is the traditional homelands of the Algonquin-speaking peoples. This encapsulates not just the Potawatomi and the Ojibwe and the Odawa, but also the Ho-Chunk and the Miami, and dozens of other tribes whose common language is Algonquin. Their traditions and cultures have immemorable ties to the earth, and so we honor their presence and wisdom throughout time. So thank you all for allowing me to read that. And like I said, this is our agenda for the day. We'll go through an introduction. We'll do a little bit of an activity, a written activity. So if you have a pen and paper, we'll need that in a few moments. We'll talk about forest bathing and health equity. We'll talk about what it looks like in practice to integrate nature-based solutions, and then we'll talk about what it looks like to develop a personal practice. And at the end, we'll have some time for some questions, for some ideas. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to just drop them in the chat, and then we can go through them at the end. So, a little bit of an introduction to myself and who I am. Maureen, you already gave me a lovely introduction, so thank you. My name is Jess Rodriguez. My parents are from El Salvador, and I grew up in Waukegan, Illinois. I currently live in the city of Chicago. I have a degree in environmental studies and sociology. And I discovered forest bathing or forest therapy in 2019 during a 3-month internship in Costa Rica. So I've been working on this practice for a while. Throughout my life, I've always kind of worked in and around nature. In high school and in college, I was a camping trip counselor. So I led young people from Chicago on canoe trips on the boundary waters of Wisconsin. I was the horticulturist of the conservatory greenhouses at the Botanic Garden. And I currently am the coalition building manager at the Brushwood Center, which means I oversee our health equity and nature accelerator program. And I have my own business known as Reciprocal Forest Bathing, where I guide people in and around the Chicagoland area through various organization partnerships like with the Morton Arboretum or the Friends of the Forest Preserves or Chicago Open Lands and Brushwood as well. I guide people in this practice, which we'll get into as well. And I would not be who I am without my favorite plant beings. So, just to get a little bit more information about me, my favorite plant being is known as molly grass or Mollenbergia capillaris. It is a pink, dreamy grass that I've included right here. And my favorite bird beings are the sandhill cranes for their beautiful dances and their ability to migrate far distances and their calls that they have a very unique sound if you've ever heard it. And my pronouns are she, they. And so with that, as we think about nature and we think about our all of our each individual relationships to nature, we're going to start off with a little bit of an activity. And so find a place to write down your thoughts on the following. Recall a fruit or a flower or tree, any nature being that reminds you of your childhood. You can name this being for its, scientific name, its common name. Maybe you had your own name for it. What do you remember about this nature being? What did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it feel like texturally? Did it make any sounds? What did it sound like? Maybe you made sounds together. And what did it feel like for you to be with this being? So take some time to write down your thoughts on these prompts, and we'll take about 3 to 5 minutes to write this down, and then we'll come together for an optional share out. I'll give you all maybe another minute to reflect on this prompt. Is there anyone in our group who would feel comfortable sharing what nature being came to mind with this prompt? Either perhaps in the chat or feel free to unmute and share with us vocally.
Go ahead, Sam.
Hi everyone. For me, it was the hibiscus flower. Um, the hibiscus flower just plays a really important role in my family. We drink it am Latina, so agua de Jamaica is really popular. But not only that, as someone who is suffering from chronic conditions, it does help me with like lowering my blood pressure, with my PCOS. So, but it just smells so. It smells very earthy, but very fruity at the same time. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like the best smell ever,
Yeah.
and it just reminds me of home. It reminds me of my family. So that's what I thought of.
Beautiful. Yay. Thank you for sharing.
Can I
Would
share?
anyone?
Can I share?
Yes, please.
Okay. So mine was like right away. The Savila is the aloe plant, but
Hmm.
the white, not the big aloe plant, the one you have at home. For me, we have always have the aloe plant in my home. And as a teenager, I remember my mom's like, she would go, and I was in charge of it, but it always grew, and then one day my hair fell off, and I started using it for it. I was like, oh, from that I became, um, it's so weird to say it, but loyal to the aloe plant that I always have aloe in my home or sometimes in my office. But yeah, so the aloe,
Yes.
Savila.
Yeah. Yeah. Be loyal to the aloe plant. We love that. Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to share?
I would share, but mine probably sounds a little silly after the first two. I'm sorry
Yeah.
my camera's not working, but my for me is very different. I thought about a lot of things from my childhood, but then I landed on my experience in our tribal community. My grandparents both lived there, and we would go every time we'd go to visit my grandmama. I'd always spend time in the field. Most of the time it would not be planted, but sometimes there'd be corn or cotton or whatever. But I just loved walking in the field barefoot and playing in the dirt because it wasn't dirt like where I grew up. I didn't grow up in North Carolina. This was rich, black, volcanic soil that would grow anything. And I loved the feel of it going through my
Yay.
fingers and the smell of it. It was just, to me, it was fabulous. And I actually found a medicine bottle in the field that was probably 50 to 100 years old one day out playing in the field. And I would be out there in the dark playing in the field. Nobody would know where I was. The house would be full of people and cousins and aunts and uncles and everything. And I'd be in the field playing. And I never dawned on me that snakes were out there. They were probably mice, maybe even rats, or, whatever. I could cut my foot on a broken medicine bottle because they were always plowing the field. But it was home to me. And it
Yeah.
still is. And I still go to that field.
Wow. Not silly at all. Thank you for sharing. And, this prompt is really important, I think, to start us off in our conversation as we continue forward to remind us that integrating nature-based solutions is very intuitive to us. We all have a relationship that began when we were very young. And, maybe as we got older, we might have forgotten or become distant from that relationship, but we all have a beginning story. And so there is no silliness to it. It is intuitive to us all. And we all have unique perspectives in our relationships to nature. So thank you for sharing. And
I
we're
would
going to
say
shift,
one last thing, if you don't mind. I
of
just
course.
thought of that now I own part of that field. So
Yeah.
I'll always be able to go to that
Yes.
field.
Yes. Barefoot in the soil is where I'd like to be right now. Thank you for sharing. So we're going to pivot a little bit to a little bit more of a cognitive thinking information. I'm going to share some information with you all, and we're going to start off by talking about health equity and nature. And so I've created this title as Health Equity in Nature, a Changing Climate in Lake County, Illinois, mostly because the Brushwood Center, the organization for which I work for, came out with a report in 2023 called Health Equity and Nature, a Changing Climate in Lake County, Illinois. Now, the information from this report is specific to Lake County. However, I'm going to share the resource in a follow-up email later for you all to have access to. While the information, if you are not from Lake County, might not be specifically relevant to you, the way that the information and the story is told about environmental justice, about access to nature, about community members' perceptions to their connection to nature, and the recommendations that the report has on addressing the barriers to access to nature is a story that is told, across our nation. And so, even if the information in this report isn't exactly specific to whoever you might be taking this call today, it can be really useful as inspiration on how we talk about and think about this topic about health equity and nature. And so a little bit of terminology that is coming from the report that is going to be relevant to our call today is as follows. So I've defined a couple terms for us today to kind of get us all on a similar footing. So climate change, we are defining as long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. If you are from Illinois, you see that you've definitely seen this a lot in the past few weeks. We will have a 70-degree Saturday and then a 30-degree Sunday, and then we will have rainstorms Sunday night to Monday, and then we will have snow on Tuesday. We're seeing that weather patterns are shifting and changing, and this has different effects for different people based on where you're located and what structures are set up for you. And environmental justice is the idea that everyone deserves to live with clean air, water, and soil, and should be included in making decisions about things that could cause changes in their community's environment. Health equity is defined as everyone having a fair and a just opportunity to access their full health potential, to take those memories that we have as young people in our relationship to nature and to be able to continue on in developing and cultivating those relationships for the purpose of our health. A lot of us spoke when we shared about the nature being that reminded us that we are recalling from our childhood about health benefits that came from that nature being. And that's not something that I asked in my prompts. I asked, what did it look like and what did it smell like? But you all spoke about health, whether it was just making you feel good or whether it was helping you in some sort of like physical aspect. We all had that connection, or at least those of us who shared. Nature-based solutions is defined as employing nature at a meaningful scale for multiple benefits because nature is holistic in that way. And a nature gap is a combination of racial and economic disparities that directly affect the well-being of communities of color. So that was a little bit of terminology. And so in this report, Health Equity and Nature, a Changing Climate in Lake County, Illinois, the report is 90 pages, and I will send you a link to those 90 pages, but we also have an executive summary. And in our executive summary, we outline our report findings. And so this came from 22 qualitative interviews within Lake County about how people perceived nature in the past few years and their relationship to it. And what we found is that people experienced solace in nature, especially during the pandemic, that being outside or with nature was associated with better physical fitness and mental well-being, that being in nature created an increased sense of connection to the planet and a greater sense of purpose, being a part of something bigger than yourself, that being in nature inspired a spiritual connection, that it increased a psychological flexibility as a result of watching nature. And this kind of means that by being present and noticing nature, people felt an enhanced ability for focus and attention and energy. So psychological flexibility means that people were able to expand their minds in a way and to feel like there was more headspace for them to think about things and maybe think about things differently. That being in nature created a sense of restorative justice, that nature was viewed as safe and not judgmental, and that these conditions are necessary for healing from trauma. So being in nature, as nature offers us that unconditional and never-ending source of medicine, nature is able to feel like a safe space for people. And lastly, and what we're kind of, moving on with this theme, is a desire for programming in nature for mental health came from the report. And so that also, to kind of give us a little bit of a timeline, sparks the rest of what I'm going to be talking about today in terms of projects and all of that. But it comes from the community, that the community has a desire for programming in nature for mental health, which means our community recognizes that this is important to them. And as people, in our respective fields who all care about what the community needs, this is important. The community is telling, at least in Lake County, that they would like to see this. And so that leads me to forest bathing as not a potential, it is a nature-based solution to integrate into our mental health services. And so I'm not sure how many of us are familiar with forest bathing, if anyone's ever been on a forest bathing walk before. I have been guiding in and around the Chicagoland area for about 4 years now, but I've been myself a practitioner of this practice for 7. And so these are some photos from a recent forest bathing walk that I led in November in Ryerson Woods in Lake County. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what forest bathing is and also what it isn't. And so forest bathing is not necessarily a hike or an ecology walk, but rather an opportunity to turn into our senses. And so it is not necessarily about getting somewhere, but about practicing presence as you move through space. So the pace of forest bathing is very slow. It's not fast. We're not really even walking. I like to say that we wander. And the focus is on our connection and relationship to the natural world around us. And we focus on not just our 5 senses, but our 6th sense, which we recognize as our heart sense. And so in its traditional sense, I, as a guide, will provide more so a container of space for people to slow down and become present in the forest. And this helps support wellness and personal development and perhaps and oftentimes healing through for the participants through their interaction with nature and their environment. Now, again, I'm going to talk about forest bathing in its traditional sense, and then we're going to talk about how forest bathing can be adapted and pulled apart. So not everything is always stagnant, right? These are all opportunities for us to perhaps take a little piece and then run with it in whatever way that works best for each of us in our respective practices. So before I get into what it is and what are the benefits of forest bathing, I'm going to give us a little bit of history. It's a short timeline, but it goes all the way, if you see at the beginning, to 300 BCE. And this timeline is kind of relevant to where we are today, where a timeline, a path perhaps that I have branched off since then. And so to give us a little bit of context for the practice, in 300 BCE and 530 CE is when Shintoism and Buddhism are noted as distinct religions. And this is really important because this gives us the context for different cultures and different practices that happen across the globe that are the center philosophy and value of how people have moved through and in connection with nature. And then fast forward all the way to the 1980s. The term Shinrin-yoku was coined in Japan as a government-promoted healing practice. Shinrin-yoku translates directly to bathing in the forest. And when we say forest bathing, we kind of mean it also in the sense of like sunbathing, taking in the senses of the forest through our senses. And it came about in Japan in the 1980s as Japan experienced a rapid increase in urbanization. and then therefore also a rapid increase in illness. And so the Japanese government partnered with a variety of organizations to combat that rapid increase in illness. And the solution, in partnership with the Japanese Forestry Agency, was to integrate this way of life known as Shinrin-yoku. And so in 2004, as part of a continued series of research partnerships, Dr. Ching Lee partnered again with the Japanese Forestry Agency to conduct research on the effect of forest environments on human health. And so research has been done and is still continuing to be done on this partnership between humans and the natural world. And so there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of research from all over the globe. And a lot of the research points to that when humans are present and in connection with their natural environments, we experience reciprocal benefits. And in 2012, the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy was founded by a man named Amos Clifford here in the United States in Arizona. And in 2018, all of their materials were translated into Spanish. And this is really important in the context of our work as people who serve the community, in that knowing that not everything is always um, accessible to all of us, right? In the beginning, when we talked about our terminology, we talked about the nature gap, right? And environmental justice, and in terms of who has access and who does not have access. So it's important for me to contextualize that forest bathing up until about 2018, so recently, was primarily done in English for English speakers. And then prior to that was being conducted in Japan. And so when we fast forward to 2018 and now to 2024, as forest bathing is being integrated into a mental health intervention for community healthcare workers and started off in Spanish, we know that we are working on something that is innovative and that is new, not necessarily in the sense of, we haven't been doing this as humans for thousands of years, but new in the context of science and research and structured programming. And so, as I kind of just mentioned, in 2024, I, in collaboration with, or through the Brushwood Center, because that's where I work, in collaboration with community healthcare workers in and around Lake County, have pulled the practice of forest bathing apart to integrate it into some mental health programming that we piloted in 2024. We've expanded it in 2025. We're continuing that, and I'll talk about a little bit of that in a moment. But first, what is forest bathing? You've heard me say the term a few times now, and if you don't know anything about it, you might be wondering, do we go swimming in the forest? And the answer is no. We always are on land and feet on the ground. And so, in its traditional sense, forest bathing, I like to define it as a practice of presence. It is trauma informed in the sense that it is slow, it is open, which means that everything is optional, and that it is sensory. Through the practice, a guide, typically a certified guide like myself, will offer my participants a series of invitations meant to prompt us to connect to the natural world using our senses, and like I said earlier, all of our senses, including our heart sense. Each invitation itself lasts anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes because scientifically that is how long it takes humans in this day and age to kind of sink in to being present in specific uh in specific ways with our senses. So each invitation is intentionally 15 to 20 minutes. And after every invitation, we have an opportunity to incorporate a sharing circle. And in this sharing circle, as you might see, we're pictured here below. We're gathered in a circle, and you can't really see it in this picture, but we have a nature mic of sorts. And a nature mic is a rock, a pine cone, a leaf, maybe a fern, a stick, anything that I can find as we're moving through the space that we pass around the circle to identify whose turn it is to speak. And as we have opportunities to share, everyone has the opportunity to share in whatever way they want, in whatever language they would want, maybe perhaps with movement and perhaps with silence. And this is kind of keeping with the pace of everything is optional to align with the practice being trauma informed. A traditional forest bathing experience can go anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours long, and we never walk more than a mile. Sometimes we don't even walk a quarter of a mile. Sometimes I pick one open space and we're kind of just in that open space for the full 3 hours. Each traditional experience ends with a tea circle as part of our sharing circle. So I will typically bring a thermos filled with tea for us to share at the end to kind of also incorporate that sense of taste, right? Because not everyone is open to me saying, let's all taste a rock. That's not necessarily always safe for us. So I bring in tea, right, to activate that sense of taste. This practice in and of itself is anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours long, but we're going to talk about, a little bit in a few moments about how we can take that and incorporate it into our daily lives if, 3 hours is not necessarily always accessible for all of us. Here are some of the benefits that have been researched specifically about forest bathing. And so, in tandem with us, us remembering that nature is a holistic practice, that by practicing and being in connection, we can experience so many different things, right? And so there are physiological benefits. We might experience having more energy. We might have a better sleep at night because we were able to either process something that was being held in our bodies or in our hearts. And so we're able to sleep better in that way. We'll experience enhanced immunity oftentimes. There's a fun fact about trees and chemicals that trees emit, known as phytoncides. And when a tree emits its chemical known as phytoncides, and when we as humans spend prolonged periods of time amongst the trees and absorb those phytoncides, it's phytoncides, phytoncides. Those phytoncides can activate our white blood cells, specifically our natural killer cells, which are cancer killing cells. And so there's also research being done on forest bathing in partnership with cancer rehabilitation programs. We can experience healthier digestion by moving our bodies, reduced inflammation, and lower blood pressure. And those are in relationship and in connection to the mental benefits and the emotional benefits, right? So we may experience increased focus. There is a theory called the attention restoration theory, known as ART, by some researchers known as the Kaplans, that have done research that when you spend at least 30 minutes of time in nature a day, your ability to focus is increased because nature offers us what is known as a soft fascination versus hard fascination. So hard fascination or hard focus is something like, when you're working throughout the day and you're answering your emails and you're thinking about all the things that you have to do, and now you're getting texts and now you have tasks and you're thinking about multiple things at once, and that's taking all of your attention. But our brains can become tired from that. And nature, by offering us what is known as a soft fascination, by noticing how the trees move, or the leaves move, or how the birds fly, or what the birds sound like, or what the wind feels like, offers our brain to focus in a different way, which can then help us increase our focus when we have to go back to our normal, traditional, perhaps work life or regular life as parents or friends or whatever it is that we might be doing that's asking for our attention to be a little bit more quick and hard in that way. We can experience enhanced creativity because nature offers us different perspectives on how to be in relationship with one another. We can experience less stress and enhanced memory, which ties into an increased focus, improved mood, less anxiety, and relaxation. There are also emotional and psycho-spiritual benefits to forest bathing. We can feel more connected and alive and present. People often, by spending time slowing down and allowing whatever has been sitting in your body already to rise up to your senses, will give us space to experience things like joy and transformation, perhaps rest, maybe forgiveness, either for ourselves or for others, or for just the universe in general. Perhaps we now have time to experience grief of whatever may be happening, whether it is real, whether it is human death or the death of other beings, or even just the death of culture and tradition. Maybe we experience self-acceptance by seeing that, all of the beings around us are different. They all have different shapes and sizes. We might notice that if you've ever paid attention, a lot of the plant stems from the plants that grow around us are hairy. The plants are all hairy, and the trees all have different shapes and different textures in their bark, and we love them all. And then maybe we, in turn, begin to realize that we can begin to love ourselves and the people around us, irrespective of our shapes and our sizes and the ways that we look. We might experience greater love and insight and awe by the wonder that is nature, and even empowerment. When you see a tree that is strong, that is rooted in being still, we might feel a sense of empowerment in ourselves, right? And how we move. And so, see, these are some of the benefits that have been researched. So, this is again all research backed. This is scientifically proven that this practice offers this to its participants. And so, keeping that in mind and thinking about, to go back to what we talked about at the beginning a little bit, which was integrating nature-based solutions, or the Health Equity and Nature report. The report also outlined, environmental justice and climate change, and, who has access to nature and who doesn't. What people thought of in their relationship to nature was what I listed as the report findings. And it also outlined recommendations on how to address barriers to access to nature. And so, again, even if you are not from Lake County, Illinois, the recommendations that can be found at the end of the report that are that go over 6 themes, and each theme has about 10 different recommendations. So we have over 60 different kinds of recommendations on addressing the addressing the barriers to access to nature. Even if you're not from Lake County, Illinois, some of these recommendations could still apply to you and wherever you are. We're going to talk about What we're talking about today is our 5th recommendation from the report, which is on integrating nature-based solutions, right? And we have these sub-themes that you see here. And the first 2 sub-themes are support healthcare providers with nature-based tools and professional development. Congratulations, we're all doing it right now. And integrating nature-based tools with behavioral health and trauma recovery programs, which is what I'm about to get into. And so, again, we have other sub-themes like climate and health, food and nutrition, research on economic benefits and return on investment for Medicaid and Medicare patients. There's lots of different ways, but today we're talking about these first 2 sub-themes. And that is why I'm going to share with you a example of something that I have co-created that follows this sub-theme. And again, if you're not in Lake County, Illinois, and you can't, or maybe you don't have capacity to participate in this program, take this opportunity as I share this example to just kind of pull and to see, okay, what parts of what I'm about to share, this example of this program that I'll share with you can fit into the work that you do, right? It doesn't always all have to look the same, but how can we pull from what is known as tierra and incorporate that into our own workspace, right? And so the program that I have co-developed in partnership with Brushwood and DePaul University is known as Tierra, and Tierra stands for Transforming Internal Experiences for Resilience and Restoration Through Acceptance. And we're really excited and proud that our acronym translates exactly into Spanish with the same acronym. So it's in Spanish, transformando internamente las experiencias para resiliencia y restauración a través de la aceptación. And so this this program was first developed with community healthcare workers from the Highwood Library and Community Center, who were part of that original cohort of community members that asked us for mental health programming with nature. And last year, we partnered with 5 other organizations in Lake County who already had community healthcare workers to continue training their community healthcare workers to lead the program outside of their organizations. This whole time, we're also doing research. I could lead a whole 2-hour presentation on our research and all of that, so I won't get too deep into the weeds, but we are conducting research to prove that our program works. And so we've partnered with the Family First Center of Lake County, Mano a Mano Family Resource Center. I partnered with Maureen from the HAP Foundation, Roberti Community House, and the Zacharias Sexual Abuse Center. And as a quick overview of what the program is, it is a lot of things, but Tierra is trauma focused and it is a group-based 8-week intervention in nature. The whole program is designed to take place outside. And it combines cognitive behavioral therapy with forest bathing to foster what is known as radical hope and restore the severed connection between marginalized identities and the land. It was developed using community-based participant research as a result of a needs assessment to address inequities, right? This is coming from the report that I told you all about. And it is grounded in the healing ethno and racial trauma framework, which is a psychological theory, and uses community healthcare workers to address the service gap and empower the community. And so, kind of in short, I am from the Lake County community. The community healthcare workers told us that this is something that they wanted, and as we've developed it, we've received constant feedback from community healthcare workers and the participants from our community to ask them how to create a program that is both in nature for mental health, but also culturally relevant, right? And so our initial pilot of the program was in Spanish, which is really exciting, and then was later adapted into English. And so I'm going to go over a couple of like the philosophies, our goals, our the common core in between our philosophies. And again, this is just to outline and showcase to us how we can apply a nature-based solution to our work and how nature-based solutions are directly related to our work, right? And so the core characteristics of the intervention are a theoretical model known as radical hope, forest bathing, third wave cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness, and cultural adaptation and using a community-based participatory research lens. We have lots of goals for the program. We have research goals, but we also have goals, for the participant. And the goals for the participant specifically are to be able to foster radical hope through forest bathing and mindfulness, to promote healing through connecting our mind, our body to our community for support and connecting to the natural world for reciprocity, to view nature as a means of connecting to our ancestral past and then practicing radical hope for our future. And we have identified this common core, right? So forest bathing, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with third wave cognitive behavioral therapy. I was not before I started at Brushwood, but I'm in partnership with a community psychologist from DePaul who knows a lot about the practice, and that is part of her profession, which is again part of this, right? We can have partnership in that way. Not any one of us has to know everything about everything, right? So my profession in forest bathing and identifying that our focus is shifted to outside the self, to the group, and to the environment. That forest bathing allows us to have an emphasis on relational thinking and reciprocity. And third wave cognitive behavioral therapy primarily focuses on self-awareness and our emphasis on what are our values, what is our purpose, and how do we make meaning. And the two together have a common core of a presence of mind and body. They're both slow, they both utilize intentional breathing. They're both engaging in our senses, and they both encourage feelings of safety, acceptance, and gratitude. And so this is how we've identified that what was once just perhaps a psychoeducational program could be used and integrated with nature, and that it is not necessarily, doing something outside of the box. It's integrated the to inform one another. And then by informing one another, we can have greater outcomes in the benefits for healing. And so this is just a quick overview to look at what our sessions look like. So over the course of 8 weeks, participants are welcomed to participate in 2-hour sessions over once a week over the course of 8 weeks that are titled, overview and creating connections. That's the group getting to know each other. The second session is on forest bathing and mindfulness, right? So really getting that practice in and understanding what is going to be our grounding framework. And then as you might see, the next 5 sessions are really psychoeducational. They're on acceptance, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness. Interpersonal effectiveness is 2 weeks because once you learn how to be in relationship with yourself, that's one thing. But learning how to be in relationship with other people is another thing and might take a little bit more practice. So we do it for 2 weeks. And then our last session is on radical hope. And I'm giving you this outline specifically of our last session to again really look at what I've talked about from the beginning about nature connection and forest bathing, and to remind us of that forest bathing practice that I introduced at the beginning and how I had said it was an hour and a half to 3 hours long, only practicing forest bathing. But as you might see here in our session outline of our last session on radical hope, that I've pulled the practice apart to integrate it into this program. And so this session is 2 hours and it is 35 minutes of forest bathing. So we don't do a full 3 hours, but we pull the practice apart. And I, as a guide, have chosen specific forest bathing, what we call invitations, which are different ways of connecting to our senses. They might be examples of invitations are, noticing for 20 minutes simply what is in motion. Or another invitation is noticing textures just for 20 minutes. Another invitation is getting to know a tree for 20 minutes, pulling that apart and doing it over the course of 8 weeks. So we start with 35 minutes of forest bathing. And then the next 2 parts, the recap and then the radical acceptance and radical hope part, are psychoeducation, but we're still outside. We're still outside and we're coming fresh off of this grounding practice. And so we're able to relate our psychoeducational discussion directly to the practice that we just did with forest bathing. That was only 35 minutes. And then each session ends with a closing tea circle. And so, like our traditional forest bathing practice, we continue to end every session with a closing tea circle that has a sharing circle. And as you might see right here, this last point, the participants are given at-home practices. And the at-home practice is known as a sit spot. And we're going to get into what a sit spot is in a little bit. But I am showing you all this to give you kind of like that creative idea of you can learn about a practice like forest bathing, and it doesn't always have to be applied in the way that you learned it, right? I learned forest bathing as its traditional hour and a half, 3 long practice. But in coming back to my community, I know that that's not always accessible, and also that we have other needs, perhaps for mental health. We have mental health tools and strategies we need to learn. So I pulled it apart and then incorporated it into this session, into all the sessions that we have. And so I'm sharing a little bit about our tea, right? So I talked about at the beginning that we had that forest bathing at the beginning, and then we had our psychoeducational component, and then we have a tea circle. And the tea circle I'm highlighting here I'm highlighting it for many reasons. One, I think it's really fun and cool. Two, our participants love this portion. They love this portion because there is that kind of what we, how I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the person who shared at the beginning. You shared a hibiscus tea, right? And that's session one. Session one, we all drink a hibiscus flower, peppermint leaf, and cinnamon tea. And that kind of gives us this like reminder. People might be able to relate to the hibiscus flower. And we're reminding them that they have had this relationship long before our program and that they can reconnect to it and that relationship to that hibiscus flower is important and is part of their mental, emotional, and physical health. Um, it's also really exciting that if I incorporated these different tea blends to each of our sessions because I partnered with a local nature wellness store in northeastern Lake County who is able to provide us these tea blends for these sessions, but also our community healthcare workers and the participants of their program are able to go to that store. So even after their time in the intervention is done, they're able to go to that store that is located in their community and talk to the person that created to the blend and buy the blends if they would like. Um, and so this is really exciting. We also did a lot of like community feedback on what they like, and we heard that like session two, this is really funny. One of our big point of feedbacks from our tea was that session two had too much clove in it. People did not think that that tasted great. So we changed it, and then we added a little bit more lemongrass, a little bit more papaya leaf. We kept the clove, but not as much clove. And so this is, I would like to highlight just again that like nature is a part of mental health in so many ways, but to talk about radical hope, which is, something that I've alluded to a little bit throughout this presentation, is that how nature helps us with this concept of radical hope. And radical hope is different from just hope in that regular hope is often individual and often oriented towards the future. Whereas radical hope is about not just about ourselves, but about our hope for our community and our hope for our environment. Radical hope extends beyond our own personal dreams and extends to our dreams as a collective. And it takes parts of our past, so kind of how I did at the beginning, reminding us of our past. And maybe there is beautiful things in our past. There also might be painful things in our past. But by being present with nature in this moment, we are able to know that even though there was pain, by being present in this moment right now, we know that there was also strength because we're all here, and we're all able to use our senses. And
Jess, I think you froze.
so if there is strength, hello.
You froze for a moment and then you came back. I heard you just say, and there is strength.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Um, which means, so if we can see that there is strength from our past, and that is why we are here in this moment, we also can believe that we will have strength for our future. And so nature, like radical hope, has always been part of our past. It is available to us in our present, where we can live with it in a reciprocal way. It can also be there for us in the future and well beyond our time as well. And from nature, we can derive strength. We can also make note of endings, of nature being destructive, of hurt and of pain, which is part of the natural order of things, as well as our own reality. And nature as well can root us in the present, and it relies on our interdependence, collectivism, and reciprocity. And so, with all of that, I've already given you perhaps, hopefully, many ideas of how to develop your own personal practice with nature. But if that wasn't enough, I'm going to give you a specific activity, a practice that you can all integrate into your personal lives. And it's important to integrate this practice and to think about it as a personal practice first, because we need to be able to feel it authentically in our bodies and in our hearts and in our minds before we can offer it to our community, right? So I always start off with advising people that if you want to integrate nature-based solutions into your healthcare practice, you have to start with yourself and your own personal practice. And so the activity or the practice I'm offering you all is known as a sit spot. And as you might recall, during the session outline portion, I showed you all that each of our participants in our 8-week sessions gets an at-home practice. We don't call it homework, but we get an at-home practice known as a sit spot, where everyone is invited to, at some point during the week before the next session, to practice this. And a sit spot is steeped in the art of being present. It is a gentle invitation to immerse yourself in the embrace of nature. It calls for us to settle into a chosen nook of nature for a stretch of time. And it is an act of patience that allows the natural inhabitants around us to grow comfortable with our quiet presence and return to their natural rhythms. In this stillness, we can uncover layers of understanding of ourselves. We can uncover an understanding of the myriad of connections that we share with others and the tapestry of the living world around us. And so here are some sit spot benefits. I've already talked about so many benefits, but here's some more. And so by practicing a regular sit spot, you can help to reduce your own stress and increase your own well-being. A sit spot is typically, for forest therapy guys, it's recommended 30 minutes a day, but perhaps we'll start off easy and we'll say 15 to 20 minutes a day. So 15 to 20 minutes a day to prove it, it has been proven to lower your cortisol levels, to reduce anxiety, and improve your overall health. It helps deepen awareness and observational skills. So the more time you spend in one place, the more details you notice. It helps strengthen our connection to nature because over time, your sit spot will become a place of familiarity and of relationship. And it helps support reflection and creativity. So by slowing down and being present, we can receive new insights and ideas from nature. How to sit spot? 4 steps. You first need to choose a spot. And it is best to choose a space that is going to be really accessible to you. So a space that is perhaps within walking distance. It can be a backyard, your local park, a forest clearing. It could be, with a tree that is outside your home. It could be perhaps with a tree in the parking lot of the place that you work. Any space that is nature. And to remind us all, nature is everywhere. It is not just your local forest preserve, or for those of us in Lake and Cook County, it is not just Lake Michigan. It doesn't have to be grand. If you really feel like you don't have green or blue space near you, I recommend, doing a little bit of research. But if that is not something that you feel like is accessible to you, you can have a plant in your home. A window in your home can be your sit spot. Once you have chosen a spot that you know is going to be easily accessible to you, then that is when the practice begins. And the practice is to sit in that spot without distractions for about 15 to 20 minutes. And without distractions means without your phone. If you have a phone with you, to put it on silent, to put it on do not disturb, and to set a timer for 15 to 20 minutes to say, I'm not going to touch my phone for the next 15 to 20 minutes. If you are someone who likes to take pictures, you can take pictures before you start your practice and after your practice. But dedicate 20 minutes where you're not going to touch your phone. If you're someone that wears a watch, maybe you take your watch off to allow time to pass by without keeping track of it. Again, you can set a timer on your phone to remind you when those 15 to 20 minutes are up. And this is an opportunity to just be still and to notice with all of your senses. What does your sit spot smell like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it look like? And then step 3 is to return regularly. A practice means that there is consistency involved in what you are doing. And whether you return daily or weekly, by returning to your sit spot regularly, you are able to deepen your connection with that space. And it's really important to have one spot in particular because then you can notice how that spot changes over time. And then step 4 is to stay open, to let go of expectations of what your sit spot should be. Perhaps one day you show up to your sit spot and it's really loud. Or perhaps one day you show up to your sit spot and there's unfortunately litter or trash in the space. Allow yourself to continue to be open with whatever happens with you and with your sit spot and simply just be present with whatever unfolds. Obviously, if you are able to and you find trash in your sit spot space and you have gloves or a trash picker upper, you're totally welcome to clean it up. It's not necessarily saying that whatever is happening in this space is okay, but to not have expectations of what it means to practice this sit spot. So that's how to practice. And lastly, as you continue to develop your personal practice, obviously I could offer you a million specific recommendations of doing this and doing that, but really allow nature to be your teacher. What is your personal relationship to nature, whether it is, putting your feet in soil or drinking hibiscus tea or using an aloe plant for its various benefits with our skin and our hair, and allow nature to be your teacher and allow whatever it is that calls to you to be part of your practice and to recognize that, what would it be like to see that nature is all around us and how can we continuously invite it in, right? I've started to practice a new sort of mental mantra that every time I use the faucet or the water from the faucet to wash my hands or to take a shower, to acknowledge where the water comes from. That the water in my area comes from Lake Michigan. And when I'm washing my hands or when I'm taking a shower or when I'm drinking water, I am taking part and a connection with Lake Michigan. I might not be at the lake shore, but I am always in relationship to the lake because of its ability to flow directly to me. And for that, I am grateful. And that brings nature into my home at all times, right? So, how can we continuously recognize where it is around us? And lastly, here is some continued learning if you liked that. Obviously, your sit spot is going to be your best teacher for practicing and being in relationship and experience. But if you like to read and you want to read more about this, there are several books about forest bathing. Your Guide to Forest Bathing is a book by Amos Clifford that takes you through what the practice is, the history, as well as dozens of invitations that you can use to help prompt you in your relationship and connection. Healing Trees is another book by Ben Page, who is one of my mentors in my certification as a nature and forest therapy guide. The Nature Fix by Florence Williams is a book that really outlines a lot of the, research that has been ongoing in connection to nature. And if this is something that is going to be, important for you as you advocate for nature, this book is going to highlight a lot of different ways in which nature is beneficial to us. And it's a really fun read. She's a really good writer. Fragrant Palm Leaves by Thich Nhat Hanh is a book where he kind of just outlines, it's more of a journal, and he kind of just describes his journey from being in Thailand to being in Pennsylvania and the difference that he's seen in, that nature is all around, but that, some of us have different connections to nature and that the nature that we grow up around is really important to us and that that relationship that we have from childhood really sticks and it's a really beautiful kind of biography. There are some poems that I'll attach in an email to either send to Maureen to send to you all, or send to you all directly called 10 Love Letters to the Earth. Um, Also by Thich Nhat Hanh. Beautiful poems that sometimes whenever I'm feeling down or I feel a little bit further away from my own radical hope, I read one of these poems and it really brings me back to, what are my values and what is the work that I'm doing. And if you don't like to read and if you don't like poetry, I have some movie recommendations. These are movies that were actually recommended to me during my forest bathing practice to watch. Two of them are by Hayao Miyazaki, who has really beautiful artistic abilities. And so, My Neighbor Totoro is actually a movie that I watched a lot as a child, which really explains a lot about who I am now to this day. A beautiful book about our connection to, or beautiful movies about our connections to nature and really shifting our perspective to what nature is. And Fantastic Fungi is a documentary on Netflix about mushrooms and how they expand across time and how they've are the only species to ever to what is the word? They are the only species to exist through all six mass extinctions. And so the fungi have really figured out how it works, and we can learn a lot from them. Um, yeah, I will send these slides to you all. You all have access to all these slides. But here is some of my contact information. This is my Brushwood email. If you'd like to contact me specifically about health equity or environmental justice or the theater program, that's going to be my Brushwood email. If you'd like to contact me just specifically about forest bathing, this is my email. I have a website, which I think is going to be under construction in a little bit, but only for a few weeks. And then my Instagram is Reciprocal Forest Bathing. You can follow my Instagram to learn more about my public walks in and around Lake County and Cook County. If you DM me on Instagram, I do not respond very well. It's better to email me. I'm not on my phone a lot, but I do schedule time to be on my email. So I only say that because sometimes I get DMs from people inquiring about forest bathing on Instagram, and then it's 5 weeks later, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But yeah, any questions or ideas or dreams, inspiration? I think we have like what? We have like 12 minutes left in this call. So if you stuck with me for this long, thank you so much. And yeah, I can come back to the group. There we go.
Thank you, Jess. That
Oh,
was
hi,
really
Valencia.
amazing.
Yes, I was just going to say, as long as I've worked with you on Tierra and on the health equity report, it's like every time you speak, I feel like I learn a little bit more. So thank you for such a wonderful and comprehensive overview of your work, the work of Brushwood, the partnership with HAP. Yeah, just great stuff. And you're inspiring me more and more about forest bathing. So we'll definitely connect.
Yay, thank you.
I had a quick question, Jess.
Yeah.
And then I would also encourage others, put questions in the chat or feel free to unmute. You don't have to raise a hand. My question was, I loved that you shared the sit spot sort of as a follow-up task. And I'm hoping to engage in that. And I was just wondering, is would a next logical step, like let's say I'm doing this sit spot, I'm doing it once a day or once a week or whatever, returning to that spot. Would a uh is, is a journaling practice helpful in that, or how might you integrate that if you want to really like
Oh, yeah.
understand how it's impacting you?
Yeah, that's really, yes. I could have included that in the slides, and now I'm going to edit my slides to do that. A journaling practice is really wonderful for your sit spot, and something that I learned to do was, the first time you ever come to your sit spot, and if you can do this via journaling, you could via journaling like written word, or if you like to take pictures, you can do this with pictures as well, where you take your journal. I like an unlined journal personally, and you can either describe the sit spot for what it looks like on the first day that you arrive to it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Obviously, post the 15 to 20 minutes of being in the space. Take those 15 to 20 minutes to yourself. And then after, journal, what does it look like, smell like, feel like? What does it feel? What do you feel like in the space today? What does it make you feel like? And then you can do that as a daily practice. And then over time, you can kind of watch how your sit spot changes and maybe how you change each time that you're in it. If you're not someone who likes to write, you can also draw your sit spot. You can draw what the space looks like throughout time. If you don't like to draw, you can take pictures and you can print those pictures out and you can make a collage of, a little scrapbook of what does your sit spot look over time. Maybe there's selfies of you in it every day. And maybe, again, if you don't want to print pictures out, maybe you dedicate an Instagram page or like a Facebook album to it that's documenting you and your sit spot. We have jokes as forest bathing guides when we all get together of like, you really trust someone. You really trust someone you when you bring them
Um,
She's not supposed to tell us when to trust someone.
you froze again, Jess. I don't know if maybe you want to try turning your camera off. That will help the internet bandwidth, but you were about to tell us.
To your sit spot, or when you show them your sit spot.
There you go.
Sorry, I think I froze.
You did. Um, is that how you know when you really trust someone? Is you let them come to
Oh
your sit
no!
spot?
Yeah, is that where I paused? Yeah, we have jokes as forest bathing guides of like, you bring someone to your sit spot, you really trust them. So yeah, take some time to document yourself in your sit spot in whatever way you would like, whether it's written journal, drawing, taking pictures, collaging, all great ideas.
Anyone else have any questions or comments or thoughts? Yeah, Adriana, go for it.
Um, just want to say thank you so much. I This is the first time I hear of this. I would go to a forest to sit there, hug the tree, but I never thought about giving it a name. And I'm so excited, to review the screens and one by one and practice and then just share with people that I trust. No, and especially with the community.
Hmm.
Because I'm a community health worker. We're always looking for different ways to help people relax, introduce them to different ideas. And I think this would be great for my summit people. In the park, we have a park um that we can go out and try this, a few times and then just get them encouraged to start doing it by themselves. We could do it as a group, not too personal, but just, but I also thank you, Jessica, I'm sorry, Rodriguez, for this great information. Excited to practice myself and get it, under my belt really good and then introduce it to my community. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Question real quick. Do you have
Yeah.
this in Spanish or have
Yes.
you?
Yeah, I guide in
Yes.
Spanish as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And the book, and I could have, I'll add it in as an edit. The book, Your Guide to Forest Bathing by Amos Clipper, also comes in Spanish.
Okay,
So
great.
you can get the book in Spanish as well. It takes,
Perfect.
I will say, and this is why I mentioned in the timeline that the materials were only translated in 2018. If you try to order more than one, it can take a long time and you won't get them all as once. I will let Amos specifically know in person that he needs to print more in Spanish because the Spanish speaking community is seeking for it. And so the book is available in Spanish, but sometimes it can be a little hard to order and to get it.
Great,
Just to
great.
be transparent about that. But yeah.
Thank you. Because I do also have a book club happening at
Okay, yeah.
Summit.
Yeah,
So
okay. Yeah.
I do 6 English and 6 Spanish, and they're very good, because our book club is not as big, but everybody's very understanding, about the English and the Spanish being together.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just order it like months ahead of time.
Great. Thank you for that advice.
Well, I want to once again thank you, Jess, so much for being here and for sharing this knowledge, these practices, and also talking about the report and the Tierra program. I think it's really um, interesting and relevant to the work that all of us are doing and really just to our lives. So we appreciate you so much. Um, I also want to let everyone know I will send out a follow-up that will include the recording of this Zoom, the slides, all sorts of these great resources that Jess has shared. And then I also just want to um, do a brief reminder that our next session of CHLC will be the April session, and that is going to be on Monday, April 27th, 2026. That will be at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, so 12 p.m. Chicago time. And that'll just be an hour-long session that is focused on understanding workers' rights. So really looking forward to that session. You all should have received invitation, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, everybody.